Hi, I'm Metta Spencer. Today, let's go to Harvard, shall we? I haven't been to Harvard in ages. I worked there for a couple of years, but it's so we get to talk to somebody who is an adjunct professor, but he's also he teaches in the Kennedy School at Harvard. And he teaches cybersecurity. Is that what you call it?
That's what the government people call it. We tend to call it internet security, but we've lost that battle. So cybersecurity is the phrase, especially among people in government. So yes, I teach cybersecurity policy at the Harvard Kennedy School.
Yeah, okay.
Which, for any of your listeners that know who I am, is kind of weird because I'm known as a techie.
Well, the reason I knew who you were is you wrote the title you wrote a book that I think has the most interesting title I have ever come across. It's Click Here to Kill Everybody. Is that right?
That's right. And I'm actually surprisingly good at writing book titles. The previous book was called Data and Goliath.
Oh, yeah.
Data and privacy. And my book before that was about security and trust. And it was called Liars and Outliers.
Well, all of those are cute, but I love the Click Here to Kill.
You like Click Here to Kill Everybody? I mean, it really rakes them in at airport bookstores. You know it.
Excellent. Okay, so his name, I should tell you, is Bruce Schneier. And I'm joined here by John Daniele, who is a friend of mine, who's also a cybersecurity man. He has his own company called the Normandy Company. So good morning, John. You've got to help me now because you're the expert and I can only utter lamenting words about how I'm always being taken advantage of, and why don't you guys help me?
But that's worth talking about. I think we're better off without the tech, and it's an interesting question why, like, an intelligent, non-technical expert would be afraid that they're being taken advantage of and that no one is helping them. That seems like a bad place for society to be. It's probably worth a little bit of conversation.
It is a terrible thing because at least once a day, somebody's trying to steal from me. And I think, I lived in a world many years in which I could leave my doors unlocked and not worry about, having anybody rip me off. But I feel so vulnerable now.
It's interesting. Because I'm teaching a class in spring semester, and I'm going to talk a lot about phishing and different ways people are scammed online. I've been collecting phishing email. I just make screenshots of different ones. And, I want to talk about the different techniques and how they work. And I never realized how many I get until I'm actually cataloging them all. And it's not once a day, it's many a day. And that doesn't include the ones that my spam filter has caught. Those are the ones that get through that I have to deal with. Yeah. So yes, the cost of this very low level sort of phishing, this attempted fraud is so low. You won't get caught, and you can just send out billions of messages. Right? We are bombarded with them all the time, and you're right. It feels like why isn't the internet safe? Yeah. And my guess is, if you're not constantly vigilant, you're going to click on a wrong link. Maybe one of the
I can be as vigilant.
Going to be once a year.
But I can be as vigilant as I can and know how to be. But I basically have to give up. I don't even try anymore. I just forward these on to an assistant of mine who has a good nose for these things. I don't know what he's doing, but he can tell me, no, this is a fraud. 99% of the time, they say it's a hoax.
And you are privileged enough to have an assistant.
Yeah.
Most people don't. And that is also bad. And if they're right 90% of the time, they're wrong 1 in 100 times. If you're getting, I'm going to make this up, 3 phishing emails a year, you're going to get scammed about monthly.
Oh, there was a time.
Those are bad odds.
A year or so ago when I was online with this guy on the phone or whatever, and I was cooperating with him and leading him through everything I bit for everything he said and stayed there with him at least an hour. It may have been longer before I began to think, no, there's something wrong.
Yeah, there's a lot of scams that work that way. And I read about them, and yeah, and you're right. People get taken, and think about it, you have to be vigilant all the time. If I'm a scammer and I catch you when you're tired or distracted, or something's going on, and you're not as vigilant, and there's not a lot of recourse sometimes. We're better than we used to be. But yeah, it's a scammy world out there. And it doesn't help that the legitimate companies are in their own way trying to get stuff from us, our data, our money, getting us to buy stuff. I mean, the difference between a criminal and some of these companies is, it's technically there, but it's kind of fine.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's true. And I think John makes his living by some of this. John, is this really relevant to the kind of work you do? Or I think you work for banks and outfits that can pay you to find big time criminals. Is that right?
Definitely. I work in the area of incident response. So dealing with ransomware cases is something that I do on a day-to-day basis. And this is when corporations have employees that are taken by these phishing attacks. And some of them are very, very sophisticated. Some of these attacks have been able to mimic the payment processes within an organization so that the victims themselves think that they're actually interacting with real finance people within the organization or real accounts receivables individuals. And in actual fact, they're making payments out to fraudulent invoices created by sometimes fraudulent organizations.
And the banks might be held to account. So here's the issue. I mean, I'm defrauding you, and I pretend to be the bank.
Yeah.
And I get you to transfer money, or you give me account numbers, or whatever I do. And then you're defrauded. Who do you call to complain to? The bank. And the bank says, I had nothing to do with this. Right? It wasn't me. It wasn't my website. It was this fraudster you were interacting with. It's not my fault. But then
I call the police.
Opinion, the bank is responsible in a weird way.
Okay, what does the law say?
So law says a lot of things, depends a lot on country. You're in Canada. I'm in the US. For credit cards and debit cards in the United States, the customer is not liable. And this is important. So if I take my card and fling it in the middle of a crowded room and give everyone lessons on my signature, and someone takes it and charges a bunch of fees, my maximum liability is $50 and it'll probably be waived. So for credit cards and debit cards, I am not at fault. For bank transfers, I am at fault. Although often in the US, the bank will make good at least as much as they can because they don't want to annoy me as a customer. But if someone gets my credentials and drains my bank account, I'm out the money. Might be different in Canada. And this is hard because I would go to the bank and say, you transferred all my money to the Ukraine. Why did you do that? Couldn't you have at least called me and said, hey, it looks like you're sending money to the Ukraine. Do you really want to do that?
No, but when somebody calls me and says that, there's somebody trying to send money to Ukraine from your account. Is this really you? Then I think, no, this is a scam person right there trying to get me to give more information to them. And
then it could be. And here we are. It's like it's wheels within wheels. We don't know who to trust. Mm-hmm. And this is why your credit company will often say, we will not call you or we will never email you. Or they actually do email you. If the bank calls you with one of those things, you hang up and you call the bank.
Yeah.
Right? And you don't say to the person, I want to call you back. What's your number?
Right.
That doesn't count, right? But this is hard.
Yeah.
I'm sort of teaching basically spy tradecraft here. Mm-hmm. And it shouldn't be that the average person in our society needs to know spy tradecraft in order to be safe online. Right? We are failing people by demanding that level of sophistication.
Okay, now the first point your book makes is that offense is a lot easier than defense. In computers, it's a lot easier to become the criminal bilking somebody than it is to be the bilkee. trying to defend yourself. And so the question I have is, to what extent is that something that is the solution has to be technological? And to what extent is it that there need to be different laws and law enforcement systems, regulations that to solve the problem? How, and then to what extent is it that I'm just being stupid if I get bilked?
You're totally not stupid if you get bilked. I mean, I think blaming the victim is something we do way too quickly.
Yeah.
Blame the user, right? You clicked on that link. You shouldn't have done that. It's a link. What am I supposed to do with it? You put that USB stick in your computer. You shouldn't have done that. It's a USB stick. They go in computers. We do a lot of victim blaming, and I think that is really bad. When I say that attack is easier than defense, I'm making a very narrow technical point. Because obviously being a criminal has risk. And I'm not saying being a criminal is easier than having a regular day job. What I'm saying is at the technical level, it is easier to attack a computer than to secure a computer. And the reason has to do with the complexity of the systems, the notion of the attack surface. There's a lot of reasons why attack is easier than defense. And if you think about, I don't know, the history of warfare, I mean, that attack-defense balance changes over the centuries as weapons and tactics improve. And you can go through history and see that kind of, those balances changing. Right now on the internet, technically attack is easier than defense.
Well, is there any hope that might change? The balance might tip.
It might change, right? It is not necessarily a truism forever. It is true right now. And it really has been true since the advent of computers. And certainly we can imagine it changing. And my guess is it will. No reason why it's static.
Okay, now the reason you say that the reason it's difficult is because of complexity. And I certainly understand that. Everything gets more complicated and I get more dazzled by it all. But
it's not you. It's the complexity in the machine.
Right. But that's
doing 50 billion things a second.
Right. And nobody's going to be able to reverse that right away, right? I mean, complexity is here to stay.
Complexity is here to stay, but there are ways to, this is getting more technical, there are ways to deal with complexity. Not all complex systems are insecure. Certain types of complexity are worse than others, but sort of leave that aside. I want to get to your second part of your question, which is how much of the solution is technical and how much of it is policy. And the answer is it is both, and they are inexorably intertwined. This is why I am teaching tech at the Harvard Kennedy School, just this reason. So we have a lot of technical things that can be done. Right? Your bank could do a lot of technical things to limit the amount of bank fraud. Your credit card company, your cell phone provider, Gmail, all of these companies and services can do all sorts of things. They often don't because they lack the financial incentive, right? Because the economics is have lousy security and hope for the best. And the way you fix that, the way you fix incentives in our society is through regulation, right? I don't want you to pollute the river because people downstream die, but you don't care, you don't live downstream. How do I fix that? I fine you or I let people downstream sue you. Mm-hmm. Those are my options. And those two regulatory levers force you to change your economic calculus so you will do the technically hard thing because it is cheaper than taking the risk. And that's the kind of leverage we need in internet security. So there's a lot of tech that needs to be brought to bear, but there's a lot of policy that needs to incent the tech. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I mean, we could talk about ransomware in the same way. A lot of ransomware affects your externalities. And the company is going to defend themselves to the point that it matters to them. But if we want them to take extra defense because, you know, it's a pipeline and a national security asset, mm-hmm. or because it's personal data and there are downstream effects to the users, we need to regulate.
Mm-hmm. So that I think it's a
tech and policy are together. You can't separate the two.
Mm-hmm. That's a really important point that you make, and I'm just wondering, insofar as it relates to vendors and software defects, you know, to what extent should vendors be responsible for producing insecure code or developing insecure platforms? Where do you think policy should line up with respect to software defects?
So in general, we want the party that is capable of fixing the problem to be responsible for the problem. It's sort of very general policy statement that you don't want, like, the driver of a car to be responsible for the manufacture of the brakes. That makes no sense. Because the driver of the car, the owner of the car, can't do anything about it. You need to make the brake manufacturer or the car manufacturer, somebody upstream.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about software defects or any kind of defects, or if you buy a ladder and there's a defect in it, and somebody falls and breaks their leg, the manufacturer of that ladder is liable, not you as a ladder owner. And software needs something like that. That the reason software is so lousy is because Microsoft isn't on the hook if there's a flaw and you lose a whole bunch of money.
Mm-hmm.
Now you read their license agreement and it says, we're not liable if we have a lousy product and you lose money, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And that just doesn't sustain. I mean, it made sense in the early decades of the software industry. We're moving so fast, that would really stifle innovation. Now that things are mature, companies need to take responsibility for their products. And yeah, it's hard. And it's not going to be absolute, right? Because some defects couldn't be foreseen, but we know how to do this. Liability law is complex, at least the United States, we'll assume Canada is similarly complex, and can deal with partial liabilities and deal with things that should have been foreseen or couldn't have been foreseen. But I want software vendors to be more responsible for the software they market.
I'm so glad you said that, because we have this is Project Save the World, and we have a platform for survival with 25 planks that are going to save us from 6 global threats, one of which is cyber risks. And the only 2 planks in our cyber risk part, one of them has to do with exactly that proposal. And it was John Daniele who proposed it, I believe. So I'm glad that, that John is here to make the case along with you that the argument, I've forgotten how it's phrased, but the position is that the manufacturer should be legally responsible for defects, which I suppose... There's
no one else who can be. So what's the other plank?
But I don't remember. I have to look it up. Anyway, I should have them all memorized, but I don't. But
or at least on a poster in front of you.
The other one had to do with international cyber norms, that we ought to work more meaningfully towards the establishment of international norms for cyberspace.
I'm in favor of that. That's hard. And it's funny, at the Kennedy School where I teach, there's a lot of people who work on norms, either norms in the nuclear space or norms in child trafficking or counterterrorism or money laundering or small arms, or all of these norms that are one level below treaties. And I used to think, well, norms are dumb, right? You don't have to follow them. You just pay lip service to them. And I've been convinced over the years, sitting near public policy people, that norms are really important, that they are slow, they are noisy, they are intermittent, but they are a valuable step towards changing behavior.
Well, then how come you don't also favor treaties? Because
I do favor treaties. You don't have to. It's not one or the other.
Right. Okay. Good.
Norms are valuable.
Yeah. The UN has this open-ended working group that is working to try to create some kind of international regime. Now, I don't know whether that's going to cover ordinary crooks that are trying to fish from my,
Generally not. Norms tend to be nation states. And you can imagine a norm, like we won't attack hospitals. Hospitals are off limits. Feels like a reasonable norm, right? But that's not something a criminal will sign up for. It's something that, Russia would sign up for.
Right.
Right? With criminals, I mean, there are norms in the criminal world, but they're very different.
I have the understanding that actually Russia, although it certainly is one of the worst offenders, has been out front in terms of proposing some sort of international regime to regulate the internet.
Yeah, it's hard to talk. So yes, but what they propose is We get to do whatever horrible things we want in our own countries. So yes, they are pushing for rules, but they are rules that very much favor authoritarian regimes. So they're not rules we tend to like.
Mm.
There's been a big evolution. The group of governmental experts was a panel of cyber experts that was established as a process at the UN. Russia was at the forefront of creating that group of governmental experts and creating some of the early white papers that led to this process to discuss what norms should necessarily be. That, of course, was in the late 90s. And there's been a sea change in Russian military strategy since then. So where we are today with Russia is it's at a very different stage of cooperation, and there's much less cooperation now than there was at the beginning of the late 90s, rather, when Russia was still trying to show that it can be an international player, it can take a stake and be a good stakeholder within the international system, but there's been far too many actions between then and now to ignore the fact that Russia is not particularly interested in global cooperation to reduce the threat landscape and the risk of cyber war. They are much more interested in engaging in cyber war in a way that gives them the advantage and the upper hand, from my assessment anyway.
Well, did you see that Microsoft just posted a blog post a couple of days ago that the group behind SolarWinds, this is the Russian SVR, is still engaging in some pretty massive supply chain attacks on systems, and they haven't stopped, even though they were really caught in a major operation in January that hasn't slowed them down. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff. Russia's not an honest broker in this space.
Well, who is
the U.S. as well, but that's a different discussion.
Is Russia the worst, or is there another country that's just as bad?
It's really hard to rank them from best to worst. I mean, what's your criteria? Russia is an aggressor in cyberspace. So is China. So is North Korea. Honestly, so is the U.S.
Yeah.
So is Israel.
Yeah.
But we like to think we're the good guys, so our stuff doesn't count. But, I think the U.S. is in a tough position when it decries what Russia does and then turns around and does much the same thing itself, just differently. And then, with a bunch of rules that, we believe are fair and just, but Russia doesn't. So these are hard conversations to have. The United States does still believe it has an advantage in cyberspace and uses it.
Yeah, and the U.S. is equally unwilling then to have some real regulation that might make a difference.
I sadly think that is correct. I think the U.S. also blocks rules that it thinks would limit itself. Mm-hmm. And we can argue that's a good thing to do, but I don't think it's a long-term strategy. I think I'm speaking for the U.S., have to give up our offensive capabilities in exchange for peace and stability in cyberspace.
Well, how are we going to get there? If the governments of the world are our enemy, then what else have we got?
And so this is hard. And this is where norms come in. This is where the UN comes in. This is where bilateral negotiations come in. Right now, there's a lot of offensive action in cyberspace everywhere. Not a lot of control, not a lot of visibility even. We know what happens sometimes, either our countries or other countries. This is so not my area, how to go from this kind of arms race based on fear and ignorance to norms and understandings and eventually treaties and eventually de-escalation and peace.
Well,
I don't know how to get there. I hope people do.
If there were anybody who actually knew, we'd be there already with respect to nuclear weapons, because it's exactly
right. You figure, and then in some way that's a lot easier. Only a few countries, really hard to use, really obvious when you use them. Very much a norm of no use. I mean, there's been no use of them since World War II, and that has mostly been a norm. That it's just a bridge too far to even contemplate.
Yeah, but you can't get them to get rid of it. I mean, if 9 countries have nuclear weapons and the rest of the world says get rid of them, what are you going to do to make them do it? You can't.
That's right. Yeah, I agree.
That if the countries that are doing the worst kind of cyber criminality, if you can call it that, want to keep doing it because they have the advantage, then how's the rest of the world going to make them behave?
I think that, and you know, I'm going to make this up. It's sanctions. It's international shaming. You know, how do we get anti-bribery in many countries? And you know, pretty much the entire world has anti-bribery rules, and that wasn't true 30 years ago.
Okay.
Or cooperation on money laundering. Or you know, there's a lot of things where we want international cooperation, and some of it is you call out countries that are holdouts, you make them pariahs on the world stage, and it helps. So this is not my area, but I'm in the same building as people who do this for a living. And I'm counting on them to figure it out.
Yeah.
Bruce, you talked of incentives earlier. I think what the problem that we have right now with insofar as it relates to cybersecurity and cyber war is that we're going forward with the same sort of negative incentive strategy as nuclear deterrence. You know, cyber warfare is all predicated right now, or anti-cyber warfare is predicated on the deterrence of, you know, if we develop cyber weapons that could punch back just as harder, if not harder, than what Russia provides, then that's sort of going to provide some deterrence mechanism for Russia. But what we've noticed,
I wish it did.
Yeah.
The United States, over the past couple of decades, we get attacked. We talk really big. We threaten retaliation sanctions. We do nothing, and nothing changes. And you could trace that kind of behavior back to Clinton. So it's Clinton and Bush. It's everybody forward. We talk big, but we're really unwilling to do the thing. Some of it because it's internationally illegal, and countries like Russia and China, ignore that. We're unwilling to manipulate Russia's elections in retaliation. And in fact, if we tried, I don't know if we'd do any good. They don't have fair elections. So, it's not comparable. We get our power grid, hit with ransomware. We're probably not going to shut down their power grid in response. We could threaten it, but we're probably not going to do it. So it's interesting to see. United States in particular seems to be in a little bit of a policy bind because we're unwilling to escalate. I think for good reasons. I don't want us to escalate. But that means our rhetoric when we're attacked is hollow. And it's known hollow.
Really requires, I think, a paradigm shift in the way that we envision policy. So insofar as it does relate to cyber war, what are some of those policy alternatives that you might be working on with folks at the Kennedy School?
So there's the Cyber Peace Institute that's trying to think about those paradigm shifts. I think they're a great organization, right? How do we think how do we build cyberspace for peace instead of trying to reduce war? Let's increase peace. And that feels like a good way of thinking.
Who are they? Tell me more about them. Who are these people? Because I haven't heard of them before. They sound wonderful.
I'm going to tell you to Google them because if I tell you, I'll mess it up because I don't have details that I have. The Cyber Peace Institute.
Okay.
I'm going to mention Access Now, which is a global group that looks at internet rights and internet shutdowns and ways that authoritarians manipulate the internet. They're a great group looking at things to do. So there's a bunch of people. Again, this really isn't my area, so I don't feel qualified to sort of opine, well, here are the 3 things you should do. And if I said those things, I would tell you not to listen to me because what the hell do I know? But
you focus on the cyber cryptography kind of.
I don't. That traditionally that's where I'm from. My background is math, but I do a lot of policy work, and I work on all sorts of different things. But it came from math. My first book was a math book.
Okay.
Your latest book focuses a lot on IoT. And I'm just kind of interested to hear a little bit more about how you feel the IoT landscape looks like from a a threat perspective and what are policy solutions in that space that we could apply. I just got an email from Mazda the other day that their MX-30 EV vehicle is connected to the Apple suite of products, and I can start my car from my iPhone. Sounds a little bit terrifying. What
Can I start your car from my iPhone?
Probably so.
Right. So IoT, right? Internet of Things, which is really the Internet of Computer, of the computer. It's the computerization of everything. And by that, I mean everything is becoming a computer. Right? So your refrigerator is a computer that keeps things cold. And your microwave oven is a computer that makes things hot. And an ATM machine is a computer with money inside. And your car, which you can now control from an iPhone app, is a computer with 4 wheels and an engine. And that's the Internet of Things. And all of these objects have become computers with peripherals attached. Your thermostat, toys, drones, power grid, everything. And I think this is going to be a security disaster. One, because these are computers and they're going to be insecure. And two, because they are very low price, low quality computers that aren't being designed with security in mind. Mm-hmm. And in some cases, unpatchable, unfixable. And it's going to be hard to secure them because they're not being secured in the first place. I mean, if you think about it, the reason your phone and your computer is secure, so 2 reasons. The engineering team at Apple and Microsoft and Google designing them to be secure in the first place. And 2, that those same teams, when a vulnerability is discovered, they will fix it and push a patch to your device. Right? So Patch Tuesday on your Windows machine, you get a bunch of security patches. This is patched ad hoc. And that ecosystem is how we maintain security. That doesn't exist for low-cost embedded systems. There's no team of security engineers for your DVR, for your webcam, for your toy, for your refrigerator. I mean, they're designed offshore by third parties. Ad hoc teams come together, write the software, disperse. A lot of them can't be patched. Right now, the way you patch your home router is you throw it away and buy a new one. That's the patch mechanism. We don't have another one. So that's going to be a disaster because they're going to be insecure and there'll be no way to fix them. Mm-hmm. And even if we wanted to maintain them, I'm not sure we can. So throw it away and buy a new one is actually a reasonable security system. And we get security in the fact that we get a new phone every 3 years, every 5 years, new computer every few years. When you think about the Internet of Things, they have a longer life cycle. You have a video recorder, you're going to replace it every decade. You have a refrigerator, you're going to replace it every 25 years. I bought a new home thermostat, and I expect a replacement basically never. So these devices are going to be around for a long time. I don't know, let's think about a car. Let's make this up. You buy a car now, its software is 2 years old. You buy it, drive for 10 years, you sell it. Somebody else buys it, they drive for 10 years. They sell it. At that point, it probably gets put on a boat, sent to Latin America. Someone else buys it, they drive for 10 to 20 years. Okay, so imagine a computer from 1979. Try to boot it up, try to make it run, try to make it secure. We haven't the faintest clue how to secure 40-year-old consumer software. Both Microsoft and Apple, if you think about it, they cut off support of operating systems after what? 6, 7 years. It's hard to maintain the old stuff. We have to expect Ford and Chrysler and Tesla to maintain their cars for 40 years. We kind of do, and I don't know how they're going to do it. So, right, this is going to be really hard for a bunch of reasons. And we don't quite know how to secure the Internet of Things. So it's not going to be the way.
It's difficult to get the political will coalesced from enough people to put the pressure on to get regulations in. And then if you can put the regulations in, you don't know what to regulate or how to do it technologically. Is that it?
So I live in the United States where the notion of political will to do something is kind of a joke. Yeah. We don't have the ability to pass basic laws, let alone laws that are difficult and complex and require thought.
Voting rights.
So I'm kind of counting on the EU here
Okay.
because the United States is just so dysfunctional.
Mm-hmm.
But, Congress, at least, I think in both of our countries, know how to legislate for things that are so complex. They legislate broad priorities and broad statements and then deputize some government agency, the United States, the Federal Trade Commission, the FAA for aircraft, the Department of Transportation for cars, the FDA for medical devices, to come up with the detailed rules. And those organizations, those agencies, are more agile, are more technical, right? Will know better what to do. EU does the same thing, right? ENISA is the cybersecurity organization within the EU that is doing that. I'm sure Canada has the same sorts of structures. Because you're right, we can't expect legislators to have the kind of technical know-how, but that's true in many areas of society. So this deputization of government agencies is the way we have figured out how to regulate in a complex technological society, right? It's true for banking, it's true for everything. So I'm okay with that. We know how to do that.
And you specialize in the technological end, being able to. No?
You asked me that twice about specialized. I'm so much of a generalist. I balk when you say the word.
Okay.
But I guess, yes, I am a techie, but I do bridge tech and policy. That is really what I do. I call myself a public interest technologist. So, I'm teaching at a public policy school. I'm not teaching techies.
Okay, so what policies, governmental regulations that exist now, would you change? There's something, you have a 4-letter thing, DCMA or something like that, which is a copyright.
Yeah, that's bad. And Canada's got actually, I think, worse copyright laws than the
Really?
US. Oh, yeah. Cory Doctorow is the person to Google for information. He is very much involved in DMCA and copyright, and he's Canadian. So he knows a lot about what Canada's doing and how bad it is. That is definitely a bad law in the United States. It protects companies in ways it shouldn't. It penalizes researchers and individuals in ways it shouldn't. It stifles research and innovation in ways it shouldn't. It allows companies to use the law to enforce their business models, which is bad. I would delegate this entire conversation to Cory because he's better at this than I am, but definitely yes.
Okay, because we should explain what it is now that we've mentioned it, but it's something that prohibits the owner from getting in and tinkering with their own equipment. Is that
basically right? It prohibits you from disabling security mechanisms of devices you own. And because software is software, it's very ill-defined and basically will stop you from tinkering. Right, so if you buy a car, nothing stops you from opening up the engine, opening up the hood and playing with the engine. Right, you might break environmental laws if you do so. That's a separate issue, but nothing stops you from doing that. In computer systems, you can be prevented from doing that by the DMCA, and that seems like a bad thing. And whether it's farmers who can't repair their own tractors because John Deere enforces it, whether it is you with a Keurig coffee machine who can't buy, third-party K-cups and fill them with your own coffee, which you're not legally allowed to do, it inhibits the way consumers can use the devices they nominally own. John Deere will say you do not own the software on your tractor, you license it. So you own the physical object, like the big metal thing, but the software that makes it run, you didn't buy.
And that's what you sign when you buy something, right?
Actually, what you sign is in a giant document you've never read.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And no one's read. And you are legally bound by it, which also seems like a kind of a weird way to run society. That there are these, and you don't have to sign it. Sometimes they're click agreements that just by using the website, you agree to it. And you agree that what you agree to might change at any time without your notice or consent. It's like super makes no sense. Now, how else will society run? I don't know, but there's got to be a better way because those aren't agreements. Calling them agreements is a misnomer. You have not agreed to anything. You've just clicked away an annoying box.
Right, right. Now, there's this thing about privacy, and here's an issue where
There are many things about privacy, but which one do you got?
I tell you, I don't have any sense of privacy. I have almost shameless transparency. I can't.
But that's totally not true because for one, you're wearing clothes.
Well, yes, but if you tell me some important secret, I'm going to tell the next person I see.
But that's different. The question is, will you tell the live stream your embarrassing sexual fantasies? Probably not.
I don't know. Ask me.
All right. But no. So no.
Bruce doesn't know that.
People who say they have no feelings of privacy, they actually do. Right? Because privacy is how we present ourselves to the world.
I'm not as offended by some of these things as most people are. They're very worried about the fact that that if I order something from Amazon, then there's a little box at the bottom saying you might also enjoy this, and they're right. If I've ordered a certain book, they know exactly what other book I would find attractive and interesting.
So most people don't mind that, right?
I don't mind that.
And pretty much nobody does, right? Because that's in context, right? Here are some books you might want based on the books you purchased. What might bother you more is if the police knocks on your door because of a book you purchased, or if you're walking down the street and a bunch of strangers stop you and say, "What the hell are you doing reading that?" I mean, when it pulls out of context, is often when people worry. And maybe it's not you. Maybe you buy, I don't know, benign books. But that privacy protects the person who's buying politically charged books, or books about chemical addiction, or books about suicide, or books about something that they'd rather not talk about. And they'd rather not. Let's say someone buys a book on suicide and 2 days later, they're on Facebook and they get suicide prevention ads. And they might say, "What the hell? I mean, why is this following me around?" Or they get something in the mail, right? Or someone knocks on their door. So
does that happen though? That's where we need the protection to keep that from happening. But I'll tell you what worries me more. And what I was doing for years, I was making videos like this, and then I was posting them on Facebook, and then I was paying $30 a week for them to boost it around the world, so that it would go up to between 30,000 and 90,000 computers. Now, in fact, it was a very bad investment because I didn't.
Oh yeah. Facebook advertising is absolute bullshit, and they're lying to convince you it's valuable. Yeah, we know that now.
All right, but still, if I was stupid enough to want to pay for it, and I did, they then got to the point where they wouldn't let me do it anymore because I'm having talks about this, or this, all of these serious issues that I am devoting my life, frankly, to trying to do, because I think it's really important for people to have conversations about political and social controversial problems. And then they say, no, you are only allowed to boost shows about your breakfast or your cat or, where you went for your vacation. You can't talk about anything serious. To me,
Facebook is allowed to do that, right? They're a private for-profit corporation.
That offends
They don't have to.
I don't care if they want to know what kind of books I read and try to sell me things. That doesn't bother me. But when they block my free speech, that I hate. I really, really am angry about that.
So they're allowed to, right? They're a private company. They're not the government. In the United States, right? First Amendment doesn't apply to Facebook. And that is,
but that doesn't bother you.
Problematic.
How? Half of my friends take the same position you do. This is a private company. Let them do it. That's their right. I get really mad.
Wait. We never said it's all right. We say it's legal. In the United States,
I find it really offensive.
It might be morally reprehensible, but companies, their job is not to be morally uplifting. Their job is to be profitable. Their job is to be as minimally ethical as possible and get away with it.
But these people are being they're being attacked every day of the week for allowing, Russian trolls or disinformation people to come in and corrupt the electoral process, et cetera. They're being criticized legitimately for interfering with freedom of speech and discourse. And they're never criticized for blocking exactly the kind of conversation that we should be having about serious global issues.
So I wouldn't say never. I think the criticism is about all the time, but you and I travel in different circles. I see that criticism all the time.
I never do. And when I tell my friends,
I believe that. It's a big internet.
They don't even feel sorry for me. They
do not feel sorry for you. That is true. Actually, there might be someone in Facebook who feels sorry for you. Facebook has a lot of employees. But no, right, companies are sociopaths. They don't feel sorry. They are profit maximizers.
Yeah.
That's what they do. That's the system we have. If we don't like it, I believe, blaming Facebook is part of it, but blame the system that produced Facebook.
Now you're talking like you got to get rid of capitalism or something. All right, go with that. I give you 3 minutes on how to destroy capitalism and replace it with something better.
So it is interesting to see, that 10 years ago you'd hear the statement that it is easier to postulate the fall of civilization than the fall of capitalism because it was so embedded. And the past few years, we are seriously hearing real people talk about what post-capitalism might look like, the problems with late-stage capitalism, and how you might otherwise organize society. Not my area, very, very much beyond my pay grade, but it really is interesting to see the discourse change.
Okay.
And I think that's good. I think we need to start thinking about what other organizational principles make sense. Because we have a lot of problems with late-stage capitalism. And it's unclear that they're fixable inside the system. Because the system is getting so good at maximizing what it does. But not my area.
Okay, let's talk about AI.
All right, we've got like 6 minutes left. Let's do it.
Okay. A friend of mine, Paul Werbos, says that it's the biggest threat that we've got. I have other friends.
I always worry about people who can like rank threats. I mean, okay. But
well, he's talking about
threat. I don't know about biggest.
Yeah, but
climate change, bigger or smaller? Who knows?
Okay, talk about ominous and short-term risk. You can talk more about how risky something is likely to be.
Yeah.
And of course, then the question of how bad it is if it happens, but that's a different factor. But other people I know say, AIs don't worry about it. It's not really going to be a threat, and he thinks it's a big threat, or it will be.
The answer is we don't know, because AI technologies are still, as much as they do, they're in their infancy, and advances are discontinuous. I write about AI threats. I think they're serious. I think they're worth taking seriously. Both attacking AI systems and AIs as attackers, two very different things. And as AIs become more powerful and capable, we as society will cede more to them for good reasons, right? I mean, they'll do good stuff, and that makes us more vulnerable to these systems being attacked, being manipulated. I think the risks are real. I think they're important. I think they do represent a major risk to society, like on the level of climate change and nuclear war and and bioterror, sort of all of those existential risks. There are groups that study this. There's a group at Oxford, there's a group at MIT, there's several others that study these sorts of risks. And it's really hard. I mean, I work in security, and it's very hard to deal with very rare, very catastrophic. Because normally, what you said earlier when you introduced this topic, you kind of multiply the percent chance it'll happen times the damage. So what is your risk for a burglary? It's the burglary rate in your area times the amount of money burglars tend to steal. Right? That'll be your annualized loss expectancy. And insurance handles that just fine. But when you deal with these very rare catastrophic risks, you're kind of dealing with multiplying zero by infinity, which like math doesn't do. And they're very hard to contemplate. But I think AI risks are serious and worth studying, and I like people who study them. I do some of it.
When you talk about security in AI, isn't that almost impossible? Because if, as I understand it, if you set the machine to figure out something, you can't figure out how it got to where it winds up.
So explainability is a very separate issue, but what you said isn't security impossible? That's true for everything. That's true for your house. That's true for yourself. That's true for your bank. That's true for an AI system. That's true for a train. That's true for everything. So absolute security, that's never true. Right? It's always relative. It's always with respect to what. It's always a trade-off. And AI isn't different in that way. But the explainability of AI systems, which is a very narrow thing that happens to be true today, might not be true tomorrow.
Oh.
Is an issue, but that's like going down one particular strand of this enormous skein of problems. And I wouldn't say that one is more interesting than others.
Oh, okay. All right. John, your last question.
All right, that'd be a good question.
Well, maybe just along the strain of AI, where do you think the most probable risk will appear with respect to AI systems? Like, what is that one risk that you think is more likely when you are talking about the landscape of AI-based threats?
So near term, it's adversarial machine learning. Near term, it is manipulating AIs to make bad decisions, and it's surprisingly easy. Now, you put stickers on a stop sign that we humans just say, "Oh, look, there are stickers on a stop sign," and an AI sees speed limit 55 miles an hour. And that stuff is crazy easy. And as AI systems enter the real world and start making real world decisions like, should I stop or should I speed up this car I am controlling? We have the potential for that being manipulated. And I worry about that a lot. And we don't have a good theory of ML security to prevent against adversarial machine learning. And, it's a really weird area. And something we need a lot of research, and I would pause before deploying a lot of systems until we get that working. So that's the near-term risk I think about most.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel you're making progress where you're located? I'm thinking in terms of teaching people who are going to go on and look after security issues and policy issues.
I think I do. I mean, that's just one of the things I do. I have a very weird portfolio life. I find teaching to be, yes, I think I do make a difference. Now, I'm not turning these people into cybersecurity experts. That's the job of the engineering school down the block. But my job is to give them a good bullshit detector. My job is to make them know how to listen to experts, how to ask the right questions, how to think about the right things. And I think I am making a difference.
Well, it's in the School of Government. And so clearly there's an effort there to promote regulation of some kind.
And, the School of Government could be populated with libertarians and have no regulation agenda at all. So School of Government doesn't necessarily mean regulation. Yeah. Be careful about that.
Okay. But do you see a trend or a potential for developing better laws, better, I would say treaties as well, to handle the problems that we see coming up?
I do. Again, as I said before, I'm really looking to the EU to lead on this. Mm-hmm. Right? The EU is the regulatory superpower on the planet right now. Uh-huh. And they're going to do things that the US isn't. In the United States, it's really the states, California, New York, Massachusetts, that are doing more things. So yeah, I think there is potential.
Okay. This has been wonderful. I really appreciate this. And what's your next book?
It's been fun being here.
Yeah, what's your next book so I can be on the lookout for a really snazzy title?
All right, it's not coming out until spring of 23. And the tentative title, which will probably change, and might change, is called Hacking Humanity.
Hacking Humanity. Okay, that's a bit ambitious.
I know, that's why I'm a little scared of it.
But everybody is getting hacked, so it's absolutely realistic, no doubt about it. Uh-huh. Okay. This has been wonderful. Good luck with it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
All right. See you.
Take care.
Bye.